Are you a forward thinker? Then you need an HR and finance platform that thinks like you do. Workday is the AI platform that helps propel your organization, your workforce, and your industry into the future. Workday, moving business forever forward.
Hey everybody, it's Diana Rossini from the Scoop City Podcast. It's Super Bowl week and the eyes of the world are on New Orleans to see if the Chiefs can make history or if the Eagles are ready to rain on their parade. Myself, Robert Mays, Derek Clausen, and a whole host of NFL reporters and special guests will be live streaming every day from Radio Row, covering all the build-up to Sunday's showdown. Join us on the Athletic HQ YouTube account every day at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. It's not to be missed.
The Athletic.
It's been an absolutely brutal start to the 2025 MotoGP season, and it's only day one of full field testing. Jorge Martin, the world champion, ruled out of the test. Fabio Di Giannantonio, one of only 3 people on the best bike on the grid, ruled out of the test. Raul Fernandez, another massive part of the Aprilia lineup, a guy effectively trying to save his career with his 2025 season, ruled out of the test. This is the Race MotoGP Podcast. I'm Matt Beer. Simon Patterson's with me. Neither of us are broken. Val Hurunchi's rejoining us for the next podcast. He's a little bit poorly, but he hasn't got any injuries. Simon, what a day.
You say none of us is broken, Matt, but it's 10 p.m. in the first day of the season. We've written 5 stories, done like a YouTube video, now we're recording a podcast, and I haven't eaten today, so I'm pretty close to broken.
Yeah. Hooray! What a start.
All my bones are intact, though. You know?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. It's been a wild one, hasn't it? I said in the community section on the Race Members Club on Patreon earlier that we'd sort of left the door open to maybe doing a snap podcast on day one of testing, but let's see. Nothing might happen. It might be a rain out, and crikey. Let's start.
Yeah, we got to 11 a.m.
Yeah.
Basically, 11 an hour into testing, things started going wrong.
Yeah, I woke up at 4 a.m. UK time. Can I check my phone in bed just to see? Because I was planning a 5 a.m. work start anyway. I was like, do I get straight out of bed now? Yes, I do. Today's going to be a long one.
There was a moment when I was sitting in the media center in Sepang, like willing one of you to wake up as we were kind of details of Martin's second crash were starting to filter through. It was like, should I phone them? Like, what's the protocol here?
Let's start with Martin's crash then. It was a brutal one, wasn't it? It was one of those ones you really wince.
It was horrific
when you're watching it.
Yeah. Someone's just replied to me on social media to say that they weren't prepared for how scary it was whenever they clicked play in the video. And that's the perfect description for it. It was a brutal crash, seemingly out of almost nothing, because it was like a off-throttle corner exit high side. And then he also managed to land in his face, which is just terrifyingly horrible. It was just cringeworthy, wasn't it? It was like, oh.
That's the bit in the video that's the scary bit, isn't it? Because you see the landing, you see the flying, and you always think, are they going to put their hands and legs out to save them? That's not going to go well. And then you see that kind of crunch, and that's where he gets the broken bones. And then the facial impact is just horrible. He has had a concussion scan, and that's come back no concussion. So helmet manufacturers, absolute fair play to that. But yeah, you still wouldn't want to be jumping back on the bike too quick.
Concussion specialists will tell you that there's no way you can scan someone for a concussion.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's stayed in hospital, he's been held in hospital for 24 hours for observation, makes me think that maybe they're at least aware of the possibility of a concussion after that.
Yeah, which would make a lot of sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those good ones where the doctors who've assessed him are not MotoGP doctors or in any way racing affiliated. Because once you end up in a local hospital, it means you're kind of out of that MotoGP bubble of, it'll be fine, off you go.
Yeah.
That we all too often see with concussions. So I'm glad that we don't have to have, like, I'm not happy that Jorge broke bones and will miss the rest of the test. But I'm glad that, we're not having to have the conversation about, is he concussed or isn't he? Because based on the circumstantial evidence, you would presume that there's probably something not 100% there, but thankfully he's going to have the time to recover because of other factors.
Yeah, whether it's written in rules or a protocol or not, just if your face smacks into the tarmac that hard, you don't jump back on a 200 mile an hour racing motorbike until you're really sure everything is in good shape. So 4 separate broken bones. Is it 3 in a foot, 1 in a hand, or the other way around?
3 in a foot, 1 in a hand. The good news is that it's 3 in a right foot, which is not terrible. Feet are easier, but it's his left hand. So it's not his throttle hand or his brake hand, which I think is the most important thing. It's the thing that's going to potentially help the recovery be a bit faster. But it's still 4 broken bones. It's still potentially 4 pieces of metal that they're going to have to insert into him.
And obviously, the pre-season is compacted this year. There's 3 days of testing in Sepang, then straight to Buriram a week later for the other 2 days, and that is it. We're not gonna see him for the rest of the Sepang test. We're not gonna see him at MotoGP's swanky launch event this weekend, you assume. And then Massimo Rivola, Aprilia team boss, said it would be a miracle if he was around. Well, he said his phrasing was very delicate. He kind of phrased it, we see riders do miracles, and then he referred to we'll have a bike for him next week, but that would be the miracle. But what was really interesting about your chat with Rivola, Simon, and fair play Aprilia for putting Massimo Rivola up to talk to the media after that crash.
Absolutely.
A lot of teams would not have done that.
No.
His chat was careful, wasn't it, in terms of trying to describe the reasons why that crash had happened?
He I wouldn't say it was so much careful as he left very large spaces between the lines for everyone else to read, so that nothing that he said will get him, his team, his rider in any trouble. But I mean, we all know what he was trying to say, and he fired both barrels at Michelin tires for this. He's insinuated, he said straight up that he didn't believe his rider had made a mistake.
Yeah.
He said that the data backed up that his rider hadn't made a mistake. He said that the tire pressure and temperature was exactly the same as it had been previously. He basically one by one ruled out all possible factors that it could have been for the crash. And then kind of said, make up your own decisions. I don't know what possibly could be left for you to think might be responsible for it. It was very diplomatically done. Like, credit to him. He played his cards really smartly on it. But yeah, he fired shots at Michelin, I think. Yeah,
that's something we'll investigate further throughout the week. Obviously, we want to hear back from Michelin with their take on it before we commit to anything.
Yeah, so it's Wednesday night, the first night of the test, 10 p.m. as we're recording this, and my first task in the morning when I get back in is to speak to Michelin boss Piero Taramasso, because I have both some suspicions and I've heard some whispers about what others think might have been the cause of the crash, and I think that's something we have to chase down, but it's also something we can't get into too deeply until we give Michelin the chance to explain their side of that right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Listening to Rivola, that, like you say, Simon, the pauses were enormous and very pointed. It was an extremely well-managed conversation in which he laid that trail of clues and left no doubt over what he was thinking. Rivola said he wouldn't be surprised if the first time Jorge Martin now tries the 2025 proper Aprilia is in free practice 1 for the Thai Grand Prix at the end of this month. Mm-hmm. Now, that's pretty close still. I've got no doubt Martin will try to ride in the Thai Grand Prix, but we're looking at 3 and a bit weeks. Even if this is surely a case where he's going to turn up and there'll be a question mark over whether he'll be past fit, and there'll be a big question mark over his race fitness.
This is MotoGP. There's no question mark over whether or not he'll be past fit. He could leave that foot behind in Spain and he'd still be past fit whenever he arrived back in Thailand.
Okay, a question mark will technically exist.
Yes.
But it doesn't bode well for performance at the start of the season, let alone his familiarity with the bike. He'd only just got... he tried a prototype 2025 Aprilia at Barcelona last year, but that is not the bike he will be racing this season. That bike was the one he went flying off very early on Wednesday morning. Yeah.
So the Aprilia team bought 3 bikes each for their 2 factory riders, for Martin and Bezzecchi. They bought the GP25, the RS GP25 that they finished the Barcelona test on, and then bought 2 new they're kind of RS GP25.1s, if you will, that have incorporated all the feedback from those tests into it, which is why there's a few photographs of Bezzecchi floating around of him wearing that lovely testing livery that he had at the end of last year at that test. It's because it's that bike. It means that this bike is different. It means that Martin, I think he's very, very lucky in that the feedback from him and Bezzecchi so far has been almost identical from what we've heard from inside Aprilia, which at least means he's not going to end up on a bike that's maybe a million miles away from what he would want because his teammate has developed it in another direction. These two guys have pretty similar feedback, so the bike is going to be pretty similar, at least to what he would like, you would hope. But it's still time missing. It's the sort of injury that, out of all the broken bones on day one, Fabio Di Giannantonio's collarbone is probably the luckiest of all those breaks because we know what you can do to recover from a collarbone.
Yeah,
it's a plate in. You can ride 4 days later. Jorge Lorenzo did it in 48 hours. That's an easy one to do.
Yeah, although Jorge Lorenzo's season didn't go that well after that. I suppose it's partly because he bent the plate almost immediately.
It's partly because he had a huge crash the week later. But the hand injuries are complicated beasts.
Yeah.
I always remember that the last time I remember someone doing something similar in a preseason test was Danilo Petrucci in what would have been my very first MotoGP preseason test in Phillip Island in 2016. And that hand injury really lingered all season for him until he had the plates taken out again at the end of the year.
Yeah.
So it can be a complicated, it's not a collarbone.
No, it's one of those where you're not quite sure how it's going to go, and it's got sensitivities that a collarbone is not going to have, provided you don't bend the plate in the collarbone. That just came to mind because we've been recording more episodes of MotoGP 2015 Revisited for the Race Members Club recently, and Jorge Lorenzo's poor start to 2015, you still slightly take back to how bad his 2014 was, which he came into mentally and physically shattered for having raced through those injuries in 2013. And those injuries start with a broken collarbone. They then bent the metal on and somehow still took the title fight to the last round. We should revisit 2013 sometime. Maybe that'll be a fun one. Massimo Rivola, in his chat with you as well, Simon, said that he kind of jokes that at the launch he'd talked about phase one of the season being this kind of smooth, calm adaptation process and mileage gathering in preseason testing. And then, as he put it, we failed phase one. We didn't. Bless him. Managing to get a laugh out of it. But
it was kind of like bemused resignation, Massimo's tone.
What else can you do?
He wasn't angry. He wasn't. No, I know. But he very much took it on the chin of, well, what else can we do? Which is one of his strengths, actually. I think he doesn't lose sleep worrying or stressing about the things that are out of his control. And really, I think Martin had done 13 laps up until the point where he crashed, and they were all just trying to get into the zone of riding this bike again, of riding something quite different from what he rode last year or what he's rode for his entire MotoGP career.
I don't think anyone at Aprilia will actually be feeling this optimistic, but we didn't expect Martin to be world champion in 2025 on an Aprilia. He's not realistically got a shot at defending this title when Ducati's so well sorted and has Pecco Bagnaia and Marc Marquez. So our expectations for Martin this year were he'll probably hopefully win some races. If Aprilia can show enough that he wants to stick around longer term, that's kind of their mission. This was kind of about 26 and maybe persuading him that 27 was viable as well. So this I wouldn't say this year was a write-off, but this was the learning and acclimatization year. Obviously, this is screwed that to a degree, but it's not blown a title shot.
No, I mean, if anything, this takes a bit of pressure off everyone.
Yeah.
Because now he's not going to be expected to win the first race. He's not going to be expected to try and really defend that number one plate. He's kind of got a get out of jail free card for what was going to be a difficult season anyway. It will impact his whole season. There was a few people that were very quick to speak up and kind of commiserate with him and say that they do expect it will impact his full season. People like Franco Morbidelli that have been there and done that, because they lost all of last year's preseason testing. So it will have a long-term impact, but it's not a disaster. It's not the disaster this would have been 12 months ago for him on a Pramac Ducati.
Yeah. No, if he was coming into this season expecting to hit the ground running and mount a title bid from the outset, this would be a very different story, but that was not in his expectations for this year.
If he was coming into this season as Paco Bagnaya's teammate on a factory Ducati, it would be disastrous.
Very much so. Of all the people who didn't need to crash today, the highest Marquez not crashing was extremely good news for him and Ducati, because that's someone whose season really would be season and almost last title shot perhaps might be really screwed if pre-season doesn't go well for him.
Mm-hmm.
Aprilia test rider Lorenzo Savadori is staying on a little bit longer now, and it's not just because of Jorge Martin's injury. Aprilia lost 2 of their 4 race riders on day 1 of testing because Raul Fernandez was ruled out even before Martin after, for the second year in a row, a massive injury-causing crash on day 1 of testing. Simon, of all the people in the field, Fernandez really could not afford to be doing this, could he? This is bad for him.
Oh, I mean, he's so lucky he's on a 2-year deal.
Yeah.
That at least takes a little bit of the sting out of it. I mean, we know what MotoGP contracts are like. They're not, it doesn't mean he's safe. But I mean, the fundamental problem here is that, you know, we're going to go on to another crash at the minute with someone that did something even stupider in theory to end their preseason. But this is the 3rd time in 4 years he's done this.
Yeah.
And that's just not good enough anymore. You know, he did the exact same thing exactly 1 year ago in the first day of testing in Sepang. He ended his whole preseason and he kind of got away with it because he went into the year on a year-old Aprilia that didn't need much development. But this year he was going to be a key part of their development strategy. He was going to be the guy that knew the bike from last year while the others learned and had a potential to deliver good results at the start of the season because he knew the bike. And all of that's gone now because of a fairly innocuous crash from, all we heard was basically what Massimo Rivola told us. He didn't want to go into too much detail because it's not his team to tell the story of, but said he just took the front and went down, and here we are with yet another preseason wrote off.
And we end up, every time I come back to Fernandez on this podcast, I'm the skeptical one going, what does everyone see in him in MotoGP? I get the amazing Moto2 season. I get the excitement there was about bringing him into MotoGP. Since then, it has just been such sporadic flashes of what this guy is supposed to be capable of. And you can put so much of it down to injuries, screwing his seasons before they start. So it's just absolutely disastrous to have it happen again. Massimo Rivola has described himself as a Raul Fernandez superfan, something we often quote on this podcast as well. Can you see even Rivola's patience being tested by this happening again, especially given that development role they need Fernandez to have this year?
I mean, it kind of has to, doesn't it? There's only so many chances you can give someone. And last year had a lot of asterisks next to Fernandez's results that kind of helped him out a little bit because he was injured at the start of the season and went into the start of the year without much preseason testing, because they switched him to a GP 24 halfway through the season, and that kind of set back progress just as he was starting to show a bit of podium pace. So there were elements last year that you can say, okay, we played a part in that. That was maybe not your fault. You were unlucky, but you lose the advantage of being able to say you were unlucky whenever there's a pattern of events.
Yeah.
Whenever you're doing the same thing over and over again, it's not bad luck at that point. It's you messing up. So he's immediately going to lose a bit of that kind of safety net from Aprilia. And it just has to be a bit of frustration that the factory team have talked a lot this year about maturity and about how the whole thing has become more mature because they've signed the world champion, they fought for a title, they're ready to do big things. And Raul Fernandez still comes across as a bit of an immature weak link in the whole thing. And you have to think, right now that there's got to be a part of Massimo Rivola, as much as he may or may not be a Raul Fernandez superfan, who's thinking maybe Oliveira would have been the better bet.
Yeah.
As the consistency rider from last year to this year.
Well, that's the thing with Rivola's pro Fernandez argument is based on the data and what he sees through the telemetry of what Fernandez is capable of as a talented rider. But that's not really the problem. It's actually delivering that on track consistently, getting the results, not throwing it down the road, not crashing again in pre-season testing and wrecking another build-up to a championship. Those are the things, like you say, Simon, that you've actually got to not just have the ability to ride a bike really fast, but the decision-making around it as well, and actually channel yourself in a way that means you don't just ride fast for half a lap and then no one ever sees it because you screw the rest of that lap up.
Exactly. Or even, the Raul Fernandez lead a race for 3 laps and then fall off.
Yes, yeah, indeed.
The moment we finally saw something approximating, a bit of being at the front from him last year.
I guess there's a degree of kind of self-fulfilling prophecy and a bit of pressure as well. You hear riders and drivers say that the more you screw up in a certain way, the more that's in your head then when you come back to it. But pre-season testing is not a qualifying lap. It's not the moment to... And I know a lot of people crashed on day one, but when it's the same person again. Also, I haven't seen the footage, if any exists, of the Fernandez crash, but I've seen the pictures of the bike afterwards, and it's not a lot of bike, is there?
Don't think there's any footage of it. Certainly not seen it at this point either. But yeah, he destroyed a bike like that. That's one GP25 less.
Yeah,
that they have to worry about because it was pretty trashed.
They made a big point of saying they were taking 10 brand new bikes to the test as well, didn't they? Just as well.
Yeah, but they're only taking 9 home.
Yeah. The other injury of the day happened in the most bizarre circumstances of the 3. We didn't even realise Fabio Di Giannantonio had hurt himself for quite a while because his happened after the checkered flag. Now, we don't have any confirmation from Digia or the VR46 team of the circumstances yet, but Simon, you've had an eyewitness account that doesn't reflect especially well on Digia.
Yeah, so it originally came up on screen that he crashed at turn 5. And we had crash photographs from our photographers that appeared online, and we said, there's no way they could have been of the crash where he hurt himself. That must have been his crash earlier in the day at turn 5 because the photographers wouldn't have been out on track for the practice start session. Then our photographer arrived back to the media center and came to find me and kind of explained that no, he had been on the start-finish straight for the practice start session. DJ come out of the last corner, tried to do a wheelie and got it wrong when he landed it, tucked the front, landed in his collarbone.
Yeah.
I spoke to VR46 and asked straight up, what happened? And they just kind of looked at me and went, wow, it was in front of the photographers, and walked away. Which is, essentially admitting that is in fact what he did. And, what a stupid thing to do. His first day in a factory bike, his first day as a factory rider, his first day in 6 months fully fit. And he goes and breaks the collarbone on the same side as the shoulder that he's just had massive reconstructive surgery on, being a Like, I had a conversation on social media earlier in the day with someone about how I think DG is one of the smartest guys in the grid.
Well, yeah, completely.
Like he's one of the thinkers of the MotoGP grid, and it proves that sometimes everybody's brains stop working, doesn't it?
Yeah, we were having producer Rob, who was producing the video that me and Val did earlier. We're having a conversation with him. We're waiting for Val's video to start working earlier, and we're just like, Digia, of all the people, Luca Marini maybe is another one who you wouldn't expect to be doing something kind of needlessly leery and give themselves a season-compromising injury. But there's almost everyone else, you can kind of see it. Maybe Pecco Bagnaia is not really that kind either. But the massive irony of it as well was the day before, Digia was talking to you and the rest of the media, Simon, about how he felt like he had a brand new shoulder. He'd done a road bike test, and that was his first kind of chance to suss how things were after some really major surgery. He felt he'd timed it perfectly. He'd raced on after the Red Bull Ring injury last August, thinking he could cope with the pain, and he'd take the surgery at just the right moment to not miss too much of 2024 racing and be perfectly fit for the start of 2025. And then this, it's mad, isn't it? Especially given that he is one of just three riders, with a 2025 Ducati. I still can't quite believe it.
I know. Man. you got to think that. Well, I mean, I would say you got to think he's in for some harsh words, but no, he won't be, because this is one of those situations where no one in the team needs to tell him how stupid he's been.
No.
You know, he's got a 14-hour flight home. Probably, well, he left the circuit at the same time as me, about 9:30. So that might actually have been him on the way to the airport, because there's like a few 11 p.m. midnight flights back to Europe. So he's potentially going to sit in a 13-hour flight alone, thinking about how stupid he is.
Like you said earlier, of the three who got hurt on day one, Di Gio at least has the best chance of not really having too many repercussions from this. Can you see him being back out for test 2 after this one?
Yeah. Test 2 might be a bit of a stretch, but he's going to be at least fully fit for race 1.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if he tries test 2. It's what, 7 days, 8 days away?
Yeah.
So he's got enough time. It'll be a question of whether or not it's silly to rush back too soon, whenever he maybe feels like he doesn't have to, or the team feel like he doesn't have to, or Ducati feel like he doesn't have to. But I think that either way, it doesn't compromise his season too much, especially whenever he's only going from a GP23 to a GP25.
Yeah, and the GP25, a couple of quite well-qualified people are going to be developing while he's not there as well. It's not like Ducati's relying on him too much for feedback at this point when they've got Bagnaia and Marquez to do that.
Ironically, it's probably easier than going from the GP22 to the GP23 on the new Michelin rear tire was 12 months ago.
Yeah, good point.
You know, with how well that bike didn't work with the new rear tire, it's actually probably an easier transition, even jumping a model, because you know the GP25 seems to be a fairly sorted bike at this point from listening to the two factory riders.
In terms of people who stayed upright and didn't break any bones on day one, it was a good day for people who'd done the shakedown and were already warmed up. It was a good day for people on 2024 Ducatis that were already sorted and ready to go. Good day in terms of sheer one-lap pace at the end for Marc Marquez as well on his first day in full Ducati factory colours. He was second to Fabio Quartararo's Yamaha. Pecco Bagnaia, I think only 17th, but didn't actually do a fresh tyre qualifying run.
He was super relaxed for someone that was so far down the order.
Yeah. What was your take from the Marquez vibe on day one? This kind of seemed like business as usual for him, really.
It kind of felt that way, yeah. It was just relaxed. There was no drama, no excitement about his day. It was just, on with business. Pretty content, no dramas. Yeah. I'm
not surprised though that if one of the factory Ducati riders was going to think, let's still get in a qualifying sim today, that it was Marc rather than Pecco who just did
I know,
that.
Of course it was. Of course it was. And I'm sure it had absolutely nothing to do with the fact that brother Alex was faster than him all day. It was funny. They come in, Mark came in to do his media debrief, and Alex was already doing his, and Alex was taking great pleasure out of, just you wait there on me, brother. I'm here first. I'm speaking to the media, just you wait. That sibling rivalry is there all the time.
That's
I love
brilliant.
it.
Yeah, Alex, the best of the 2024 bikes, in third place, with Gresini teammate Fermin Aldiger pretty decent, close behind him. Aldiger had the shakedown test, which rookies get as well to warm up. A bit of a shame to not have Val here on a Aldiger going well day, actually, isn't it? But I can tell you, listeners, that while all the Martin injury stuff was breaking and we got confirmation that he couldn't do the rest of the test, Val was just persuading our social media team to do a graphic comparing Fermin Aldiger's test pace to Pedro Acosta's test pace last year.
Of course he was.
Of course he was.
Fermin, my biggest compliment to Fermin today wasn't his lap time. It's funny that there's a couple of riders who have changed teams over winter, who have stepped up to MotoGP and have found themselves working with someone new. And as a result, both Fermin Aldiger and Enea Bastianini have dramatically improved their English over the last few months.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, obviously, Fermin Aldiger is now working with Frankie Carcetti,
who,
despite speaking fluent Italian, is British. But also, MotoGP works in English quite a bit.
Yeah.
And Bastianini has admitted that he's unfortunately had to stop speaking Italian now that he's in a French team running an Austrian motorcycle. And it's noticeable how much they've improved.
I mean, is there a bizarre thing about like historic national politics and identity that the solution to an Italian joining a French team that runs Austrian kit is to speak English? But
I remember at one point someone asked why English was the language in the box to Fabio Quartararo, and he kind of went through the list of, well, I'm French, my crew chief is Italian, most of my mechanics are Spanish or German, my data engineer is Japan, or my data engineer is Spanish. My engineers from Yamaha are all Japanese. My Olin suspension technician is Swedish. The team boss was Swedish because it was Stiggy, and Razlan, who was Malaysian.
Oh, yeah.
So suddenly, you speak English.
Yeah. As a publication that publishes podcasts, websites, and videos in English, I'm very grateful to MotoGP and other forms of motorsport for choosing our language that most of you don't actually speak as your first language is like the kind of average that'll do. That is handy for us. Looking elsewhere on the timesheet, actually looking elsewhere in the paddock, Fabio Quartararo fastest for Yamaha, both Pramac Yamahas in the top 10 as well. Now, how much of that, this is why we need Val to be Yamaha skeptic. How much of that was they've done the shakedown, they're good to go? How much of it was another sign that Yamaha's getting somewhere?
They've done the shakedown, and that's a massive help. But I think the fact that there's three of them at the sharp end is a pretty good sign that things are going in the right direction. Although in saying that as well, like they're testing, they're still throwing new bits at the bike and they're still trying lots of stuff. So it's not just a case of, they've developed the bike in the shakedown and now they're throwing new tires at it and going as fast as they can. So I think there is a bit of promise there. But honestly, the Japanese performance of the day, considering that they didn't do the shakedown, for me was Joan Mir sneaking into P6.
Yeah. And sounding happy.
Yeah. Well, he said afterwards in his debrief, he said, like, I was happy, I was smiling. And I messaged to the office group chat to say Joan Mir's just said he's happy and smiling. And you said, was that before he got on the bike?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, Honda. That was my first reply.
He described today as his best day of Honda testing to date.
Yeah. I sigh at that because I feel like Paul Espargaro did that as well.
True. Very true. But I think Paul did it in his first test.
I was going to say, was that like day one and it was all downhill?
Yeah. I think it was day 4 because it was Qatar. So it was the second, day 1 of the second test at a circuit that he loved. Whereas Mir has been there and done that. He's ground through the crap side of it. And I think sounded a little bit today like someone that's seeing light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, and let's be fair to Honda with this. Mir's vibe was genuinely encouraging. You heard from Johan Zarco before the test started, and he was thinking much more long game. He was kind of reminding everyone that Romano Albesiano, who's joined from Aprilia, had only started work on the 1st of January. They weren't even working with his ideas yet, that they hadn't he knew the Japanese engineers were working hard, but everything he had felt so far on track was fairly similar, that the engine step that was to come wouldn't be seen at this test. Basically, Zarco's vibe was pretty much, don't look at Honda yet, we'll get there, but don't look at us tomorrow. But Mir sounded like someone who actually had tried some bits that he liked and that things were coming through that were working.
Yeah, I mean, Honda brought visibly different new stuff. Honda, it seems, were probably alongside Ducati or alongside KTM today, the second manufacturer to bring a rear mass damper to MotoGP.
Yeah.
Which is basically a great big floating weight to sit above the tail unit and try and get rid of chatter and smooth out a lot of the motion of the bike. Ducati have been doing that for years, but it was a massive project. Like they brought in structural engineers, people who build skyscrapers to stop them from falling over during earthquakes, originally to build that technology. And the guy actually that headed the project was, Matt, you'll know this. Someone brought in a mass dampener in F1.
Yeah.
And it was really quickly banned.
So from memory, I'm going to say that was Renault some point in the mid 2000s, but I can't remember for sure.
Well, Ducati hired that guy.
Okay.
So that's that's been where they've got their technology from, and it's taken until now for anyone else to even experiment with it, at least that we've seen. But it definitely seems like Honda's doing it, and maybe KTM as well. And that's like fair play. That's a big investment. That's not cheap technology to be playing with. So it's a nice sign that they're still moving in the right direction, I think.
Yeah, I've with my spare hand quickly Googled, and my memory was correct. It was Renault during its 2005 title-winning campaign that ended up getting its double championships across 05 and 06, even with that being banned. So, yeah.
If only MotoGP had the common sense to do things like allow teams to run something for a season and then ban it at the end of the year, then we wouldn't have radar devices anymore.
At least no malfunctioning ride height devices seem to cause any of day one's crashes.
Silver linings.
Yeah, indeed. We'll do a quick nod to KTM as well while we're here, mainly because not so much the day one form and the day one vibe was like fine from KTM, but what really struck me about KTM this week, they had that very open launch that we've covered on the podcast already, and then before pre-season testing, they got all the riders back out in front of the media in person again for another chat. Mm-hmm. And Brad Binder and Pedro Acosta were throwing in very deliberate, we've been to the factory, we've seen the bits, this is real.
Well, it turns out that, so Brad Binder, who is like, Brad is Mr. Chill anyway. Nothing gets him too excited. Brad went whenever they did the photo shoot in the middle of January to kind of spend a bit of time in the race department and see everything that they'd prepared. Pedro Acosta, whose management has been quite a bit more outspoken about the state of KTM, went just before Christmas for a look at all the shiny new bits we've already built for next year for you campaign. And don't get me wrong, I think that they're being maybe a shade optimistic. They're very much glass half full here, where a fully developed 2025 racing program that was already funded and budgeted for before everything started to fall apart doesn't necessarily prove that there's a long-term future that's going to see them sitting on a KTM for the entirety of their 2-year deals.
Yeah.
But right now, as things stand, KTM have come into this season as if there wasn't a $3 billion hole in the budget back at home.
Yeah. I think the key...
Which is the best we could hope for.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's brilliant. And I'm really glad for everyone involved and for the competitiveness at the start of the season. But in terms of when you judge when the parts are arriving, that's not so much Sepang test, February 2025. That's Misano test, September 2025, when you want to see how many big boxes are landing outside the KTM garage, really.
Yeah. And it seems like there's lots of boxes.
For now. Yeah.
For now.
So, thank you, Simon, for joining me for this emergency Snap podcast on day one. Listeners, the plan is not to do a Snap podcast on day 2, but maybe maybe 4 a.m. UK time Thursday morning I'll be going. Yeah, Simon, I think we're going to need to do a podcast. But we'll definitely do one on Friday when the test finishes. All three of us, me, Val and Simon, rounding everything up. Keep an eye on the YouTube channel, the Race MotoGP on YouTube, for me and Val giving our take on Martin's crash and everything else on day one. Find us on Patreon in the Race Members Club if you haven't already, and chat in the community about testing as well, because that's kicked off quite nicely through day one, and me, Simon and Val are in and out of that as well. And we're back in your ears on Friday or maybe Thursday, but I'm just touching wood.
The Athletic.